Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the EFSA webinar on the recently updated calculator for the estimator of non-dietary exposure to plant protection products, the so-called OPEX calculator. Before starting, some housekeeping information and explanation on how the interface works. You have seen that you are automatically connected on the listening only mode. So please use the platform, the chat box you see on your right for submitting your question. You can submit question whenever during the presentation of the updated calculator that is going to start soon. And during the presentation, you can submit your question, and once addressed, the questions and answer will be visible to all directly in the chat box. The language of this event is in English, and the event is going to be recorded. The recording will be published on the EFSA website with the presentation shortly after the event. After the closure of the event, you will receive in your inbox a link to a survey you are kindly asked to fill in order to collect your feedback to possibly improve the future webinars. In this slide, you can see the speaker and contributors to this event. My name is Arianna Chiusolo. I'm a scientific officer in the Pesticides Peer Review Unit of EFSA, and I'm organizing this webinar together with my colleague, Frederic Istas, and with the support of two external experts, Maktel Barwick from Open Analytics, the contractor in charge of implementation of changes to the calculator, and Paul Hamey, member of the OPEX working group. They will contribute to answer the question you will ask. This is the agenda for the event. After this introduction, my colleague Frederic will present the amendments to the updated calculator and show the new functionalities. As said, the participants can ask questions during this presentation using the chat box, and this will be addressed directly there. Question will be addressed as much as possible, of course, depending on the number. Considering also the large attendance, it is possible that we are not able to address all the questions. So, to this point, I would kindly recommend you to submit questions pertinent to the topic of the event. So that's to say the functionality of the OPEX calculator. So please focus your questions on these topics. Before closing the event, I will briefly provide an overview of the project for the update of the OPEX guidance that include also this revision of the calculator. And with this, I leave the floor to my colleague Frederic Istas to start with the overview of the calculator.
Good afternoon to all of you. So as presented already by Arianna, I'm Frederic Istas, also scientific officer in the pesticides unit, a part of the mammalian toxicology team, and involved already for many years in the OPEX calculator and guidance development. So I have the pleasure to introduce you to the recorded presentation of the calculator. So please, Arianna, if you can send it. Good afternoon. This presentation will be on the update of the OPEX calculator. I will start with a short introduction on the methodology used to assess operator, worker, resident, and bystander exposure during use of plant protection products, with also a short description of the EFSA guidance and related calculator. After this introduction, I will give you an overview of the update of the calculator, dealing with correction of calculated values, increased flexibility of the calculations for the users, and generation of ad hoc reports. Let's start with the methodology to be used during the assessment of plant protection products. Methodology providing exposure estimates for operator, worker, residents, and bystanders. The first group of interest are the operators. Usually, they are the farmers, performing mixing loading by pouring the plant protection products into the tank, into water, and then applying the dilution in the field, and at the end of the day, cleaning the application equipment. They will be exposed dermally and by inhalation. For the development of the EFSA guidance in 2014, 34 field studies were analyzed and used to build models for exposure assessment of operators during their different activities, monitored during the field studies. For the development of the EFSA guidance 2022, 10 additional field studies were analyzed and used to build models for operators during uses in greenhouses. The second group of interest is the worker. The workers are the persons re-entering the treated field, the treated crops, after the application of the plant protection product, and they perform re-entry tasks, including activities such as crop inspection or harvesting or maintenance. As for operators, the relevant routes of exposure taken into account are dermal and inhalation. For the development of the EFSA calculator and guidance in 2014, a limited dataset was available, including some data for re-entry in greenhouses with the application of task-specific factors. For the update of the EFSA guidance in 2022, new field studies and new literature data were considered in relationship with the main factors determining the worker exposure. These factors are the amount of residue on the foliage, represented by the dislodgeable foliar residue value, the intensity of the contact with the foliage, represented by the transfer coefficient values, and the dissipation rates, represented by the DT50 values. Of course, the overall duration of the activities is also a factor included in the worker exposure estimates. The third group of interest includes bystander and resident. They are exposed by inhalation, by the skin, and for children, oral exposure is also taking place, with hand-to-mouth and object-to-mouth contact. The 4 exposure pathways considered in the calculator for bystander and resident are exposure to vapor by inhalation, exposure to spray drift during the application phase, resulting in exposure by inhalation and by dermal route. And then the spray drift also results in surface deposits. And this third exposure pathway can lead to dermal and oral exposure of children. As a 4th exposure pathway, we also have the entry into treated crops with contact with the treated plants. It is based on a limited data set that the first EFSA guidance has developed the approach to estimate exposure of bystander and resident. This limited data set resulted in the application of only 2 default air concentrations, 15 microgram per cubic meter for moderately volatile compound and 1 microgram per cubic meter for low volatile compound. And as there was no valid EU data for oral exposure of children, US EPA approaches have been adopted in the EFSA calculator. The second part of my introduction will give you a short description of the EFSA calculators that were developed together with the EFSA guidance. The first EFSA guidance was developed in 2014, together with an Excel calculator, providing exposure estimates for the 3 groups: operator, worker, bystander, and residents. The first update of the EFSA guidance has been accompanied by the development of an online calculator. The first version of this online calculator was published together with the guidance in January 2022 and presented during a webinar in February 2022. Following the webinar, feedback and comments were taken into account, and some corrections of calculations were brought in an updated version of the calculator in 2023. During 2023 and 2024, additional feedback was sent to EFSA and received from users, reporting some last mistakes or bugs, but highlighting also some limitations of the online tool. On this basis, EFSA identified the need for a more important update of the calculator. This update would include corrections of calculated values, generation of ad hoc reports, and also increased flexibility for the needs of the users. As a result, in January 2025, the updated calculator was made publicly available on the online platform. The first part of the update of the calculator is related to correction of calculated values. All the details about these corrections can be found in the info sheet of the calculator, in the section Technical Documentation. There you will find in the news the history of all amendments brought to the calculator. You can see a few examples of the corrections that were included in the version 1.1.0 of the calculator. If you look at the first one, in the case of amenity, grassland, and turf harvesting, the calculation of the safe re-entry interval was wrongly based on dislodgeable foliar residue, and now it has been corrected and it is based on turf transferable residue. Another example, the re-entry TC value for strawberries and cane fruit for searching, reaching, picking has been corrected. The wrong values had been attributed before. Another example, treated area values for vehicle-mounted non-arable land are corrected because the default value changes from vehicle-mounted application or handheld application. Adjusted calculation of entry into treated crop risk for bystander and resident in bare non-arable land has been adjusted because in the previous version of the calculator, contact with crops was taken into account, while in the case of bare arable land, there is no crop at all. So it has been modified into contact with soil residues. And as other examples of changes that have been brought to the version 1.1.1, you can see that the dense scenario has been restored for citrus because they are part of the orchards, and dense scenario is also applicable to this crop according to the guidance. We also did the correction of drift reduction, which should be allowed for both downward and upward spraying and not only to downward spraying. Also, the registration report have been amended because some bugs had been noted. The second part of the update of the calculator has the aim to increase the flexibility of the tool in order to address more specifically the needs of the users. Actually, this increased flexibility was already an improvement in the first online tool when compared to the original Excel calculator. As you can see, in the first version of the online calculator, additional features were already included, such as an optional calculation of air concentration on the basis of the saturated vapor concentration, the inclusion of soil-borne residue approach, which was before a calculation proposed in an annex of the guidance. Now it has also been included in the tool. Pro rata calculation of thermal absorption. This is an approach recommended in the EFSA guidance for thermal absorption, so it has been considered useful to include this pro rata calculation as well in the OPEX calculator. Inclusion of safe re-entry period calculation, because previously this calculation had to be done separately of the calculator. Now it is automatically included in the calculator. Combined exposure for different active substance in one product, and generation of a report with detailed results. Then in the calculator 2025 that we have just updated, the increased flexibility has been brought at different steps. First, in the data entry. When entering the dermal absorption values that were determined experimentally, there is no change. You have the same table than in the first online version. But when you have no experimental data, you can tick the box, and then one window is popping up with some instructions for the choice of default values. These instructions that you can see here are directly taken from the EFSA guidance on dermal absorption. You can choose between two formulation categories. You see organic solvent-based or other, or water-based, dispersed or solid. And the related default dermal absorption values will appear in the table of the data entry sheet. They will appear also together with this window. And you see default dermal absorption value for organic solvent-based is 25% for the concentrate and 70% for the dilution, while the default value for a water-based formulation or solid formulation is 10% for the concentrate and 50% for the dilution. After the dermal absorption in the data entry, some modifications have also been made to the choice of re-entry activities under application scenarios. Previously, so in the first online tool, only one activity could be chosen in this box. You see here inspection irrigation. Now, in the updated calculator, all relevant activities for the crop under consideration can be selected. Another improvement in the application scenarios has been made for the entry application rate. When you click on the info bullet close to application rate, a pop-up window will appear showing you the conversion of the application rate from kilo of product per hectare to gram of active substance per hectare. This is for sure very useful, since in the table of representative uses, the application rate is frequently expressed as amount of active substance per hectare. So it is nice to see the conversions once you enter the data to calculate the exposure estimates and do the risk assessment for your product. A last improvement in the application scenarios has been brought under method of application. In the previous calculator, only one buffer strip, here you can see 2-3 meters, and one drift reduction value, here 0%, could be chosen. Now, in the updated calculator, it is possible to select a combination of buffer strip and drift reduction values according to the use under consideration, since for high crop, buffer strip of 2-3 meters is not applicable for high crop spraying. In this case, you will only have the combination of 5 and 10 meters for buffer strip and 0 and 50% for drift reduction. After these changes in the data entry, now we go to the tab Summary of the results presented in the online tool. You see the first consequence of the selection of multiple drift reduction and buffer strip combinations. In the previous online tool, the selection of different buffer strip or different drift reduction had to be done by entering different uses, different application scenarios, and you can see the result here. 6 uses corresponding to the six combinations of buffer strip and drift reduction values. Now, in the updated online tool, you see that for one use only, you can have all the combinations appearing in the results, which is much more efficient. Going to the tab for the operator results. The results are presented now slightly differently. In the previous version of the calculator, you had a long list of all combinations of PPE, and it was not possible to select a particular combination of PPE. Now, in the updated version, it is possible to choose specific PPE for a single scenario or for all scenarios. And you can see on this slide the window that is appearing when you click on the button Add More PPE RPE. And you have, for the different parts of the body, the choice between workwear, rain suit in the case of greenhouse use on dense crops. For the hands, you can have gloves. For the head, you can have a face mask or hood. And for the inhalation, you have PPE, FP, respiratory protective equipment, category 1 or category 2 that can be selected. For the results of the worker exposure, since now it is possible to select different re-entry activities for the same use under the application scenario, the results will all appear under the tab Worker. So you see here the view from the previous calculator. So for two re-entry activities, you had two bullets, or field one, use 1 and use 2. While now in the updated calculator, you see that in one screen, you can have the re-entry activity for hand harvesting and the secondary activity for inspection, because both were selected in the application scenario. Another added value for the worker, in addition to the calculation of safe re-entry interval, which was already implemented in the first online tool, we have now the possibility to choose a custom re-entry interval. So the user can choose exactly the re-entry interval for which you would like to see the exposure estimates, and they will appear immediately below in the tool. Finally, for resident and bystander, you can see that the same in the previous calculator, in the case of different buffer strips and drift reduction values, you had to enter every time a new use. So you had a long list of uses and it was not clear to which one correspond a drift reduction of 50% or to which one correspond buffer strip of 10 meters. While now, in the updated calculator, you have only one use on field crops and you can select below the combination for which you want to see the results. And in the last two tabs for resident and bystander in the tool, the selection of multiple combinations of drift reduction and buffer strip values will also be reflected in the results. You will see for each set of results, each table of results, in the line above, the description of the different parameters that have been taken into account. You see here, buffer strip 2, 3 meter, drift reduction 0, buffer strip 5 meter, drift reduction 0. And so you have the 6 combinations that I already described you earlier that were selected in the application methods. The third and last part of the update concerns the generation of ad hoc reports. In the first online tool, it was possible to generate one report. When many uses had been entered in the calculator in the data entry for one product, this could take some time before being able to download the report. In the updated version, now, 3 types of report can be generated. A general report, similar to the previous one, but with some more details. The registration report, which can be used at member state level for national authorization, and the peer review report that can be used for the peer review assessment as an entry for the list of endpoints. Another big improvement of the updated tool is that the reports are now automatically downloaded on your computer. You do not need to push on the generate report and then wait for the generation of the report before being able to download it, but the tool is doing everything on its own. Once you click on the download button, it is generated and automatically downloaded on your computer. So here you can have an overview of what you will obtain in the general report. So it's the same, you see with different colors to identify when the use is safe, when the use is not safe, and when there is a need to have risk mitigation measure, in this case personal protective equipment, to have a safe use. And you have tables of results for operator, worker, and bystander and resident. The second report that can be generated is a peer review report. So as I already told you, the structure is similar to the list of endpoints because the aim is to support the drafting of the list of endpoints in the assessment report and in the EFSA conclusion. And finally, the registration report can also be generated for use at member state level for national authorizations. To conclude this presentation, I hope really that this updated calculator will better address your needs and expectations, since it has been transparently developed in accordance with the EFSA guidance, applicable from the 1st January 2023. And it is the official tool to use in the context of approval or renewal under the regulation 1107. Okay, I hope this first presentation was crystal clear for you. So now I have the pleasure to introduce you a second presentation, so a demonstration of the use of the tool directly. So please, Ariana, thank you. Start now with a practical demonstration of the updated OPEX calculator. So when you go on the website R4EU for the EFSA statistical models, you can find the tile OPEX 2025. Opening it, you see first the info sheet. When you go through the info sheet, you have all updated instructions as well, explaining you the new functionalities of the calculator, how to enter your data. And if you go down through all the instructions, so it is useful to read them once. You will go to some additional information. Here we have the technical documentation with the news. So in the news, you can find the list of all amendments that have been done in every new version of the calculator after the correction of functionalities that were not working, of calculations that were bugging, or choice that were not correctly implemented. So you can see all these details here. And if you continue to go down in the info sheet, so you see also personal protective equipment with the explanations. You see also important information in the background data. So as you can see here, information is available about the correction factor for protection, the default application equipment, so the treated areas, if it's tractor mounted or handheld application, personal protective equipment that is implemented in the tool, the equations for the outdoor models, for the indoor models, the transfer coefficients for the workers, and the models for granular application. So when the plant protection product is not diluted, but applied as granules. Then after this info sheet, you can go to the tab Data Entry. I will retrieve in the info sheet the example product. Okay. And when you go to the data entry, you have the summary of the product. When you enter the product for the first time, so after putting the information on the product, the name, the formulation type, the category, please note the category. An important detail is that when you select herbicide, the application will always be downward spraying because the weeds are considered as low crops and needing downward application. While when you select other for the other functions than herbicides like fungicide, insecticide, then you can have the upward spraying in case of high crops. This was for the product. The next sheet is for active substances, so you can enter the name of your active substance. As in the previous version of the calculator. Now, for the dermal absorption, you can have either experimental data or default value. You have the explanation here in the info bullet. So when you have experimental data, if you select a product, an active substance, a concentration in the product, EOL, then you see that the concentration of the active substance in the product appears immediately in the table for the dermal absorption of the concentrate, and you can enter manually your experimental value. In case you do not have experimental value, you click here and you see immediately the info windows that I was explaining you in the previous presentation, where you can choose between organic solvent-based or water-based. And once you choose one formulation, the default dermal absorption value appears automatically in the table. So this was just an example. I will not register this new active substance. When going to the application scenarios, you can select the crop, and you see, as previously, if it's indoor or outdoor. You can choose also between indoor or outdoor. And when you come to the re-entry activity, now you have all the possible activities for the workers appearing, and you can choose all of them or only some of them. So here I choose reaching, picking, and inspection irrigation. And you have the related transfer coefficient and the time duration of exposure appearing below. So it's transparently shown what is used in the calculation. Then you apply the application rate of the product. And now you can see that when you apply the application rate of the product, you can see the equivalent amount of active substance per hectare. So it is useful when you have in your gap table the active substance expressed as a pure active substance to be applied per hectare. Then you see immediately the conversion, and you can amend what you have entered in the table if it's not the value you want to use. You can choose maximum number of application, and then the re-entry interval. The interval between applications, you can change the number. The default one appearing is 7. And further down, when you come to the method of application, so here it was low crop, so we just have downward spraying. You can choose the application technique, if it's vehicle mounted, manual handheld, or manual knapsack. And the new functionality is that you can choose the combination of buffer strip and drift reduction among all available ones. So meaning you can have buffer strip to 3 meter without drift reduction, 5 meter without, or the same three values, 2, 3, 5, and 10 for 50% drift reduction. And all the values will appear in the results. And then you don't forget to add your scenario when all data are entered. Going to the intended use. So if you have made changes in the previous data entry sheets, you need to refresh here to be sure that the calculations will be updated accordingly. So in this table, and in the previous calculator, you can choose to refine the DFR value, DT50 value for the worker once you click in the relevant boxes. Then you can enter manually the values that you want to be refined based on, for example, experimental data. Then when you come to the summary of the product and of the uses you have entered, it is important to save the product. I can do it. So in case you are waiting, you are doing something else and not finalizing your exposure assessment, the data are saved and will not be lost because the tool can stop working after 10 minutes of activity. So then you could lose all your data. So it is important to save the product once everything has been entered. Then we need to go to the summary of the results. In the summary of the result, you see now, as explained already previously, that you can download three types of report. So the general report, the registration report for use at member state level for national authorization, and the peer review report that can be used for the assessment report and list of endpoints submitted for the peer review. And as I also explained you earlier, now once you click on the report, it is generated and automatically downloaded, so you can go on with your assessment, with your activities without waiting for the button download report to appear. Now everything is done automatically. The results, they appear as previously with different colors according to the need of risk mitigation measure to obtain an exposure level below the AOEL or the AAOEL. You see the report has been downloaded now. When you go to the results of the operator, you can see here that you have field crops or carrots. And if we had chosen a drift reduction, we would have here a second bullet for the 50% drift reduction. You see for the two active substances, when you select the line, the results appear immediately behind. And now we have also an overview of the selected scenario. So you see all the parameters and the result of the exposure estimates just below. And as a new functionality for the operator, you see here that we can add more PPE RPE. For this single use, for example, you can choose gloves during mixing loading. You can see that also face shield can be chosen for the head, for the thermal exposure of the head. And for the inhalation exposure, it can be reduced by the use of FP1, P1, or FP2, P2, and similar respiratory protective equipment. And for the application, it's the same. In case of high crop, you have the use of closed cabin that is implemented. And for the hands, you can use gloves, but please note that when you choose closed cabin, it appears everywhere because it's protection of the whole body. And below this single scenario, you have the results for all scenarios, indicating for which use they appear. So for the use one field crops, you see per substance. So we have this Legolin 1 and Legolin 2, two active substance, or you have the combined exposure expressed as hazard index, as in the previous calculator. And you can also add more protective equipment if you want to further mitigate the exposure estimates. For the worker, again, we have these two uses. If in this case I choose all cards, it is the same. The first line in the table, the line you selected, I can select the second one for Legolin 2, and you see that it appears just below with all the parameters of the selected scenario and the exposure estimates just below. And further below, we have all scenarios for the two active substances. And now you see for the workers, you have the different activities appearing. So we have for Legolin 1 reaching peaking, Legolin 2 reaching peaking, and yes, I had not selected other scenarios, but if you had selected other reentry activities, they would appear here and they would all appear in the results below. Additionally, for the worker, we have the possibility to add a reentry interval. So if we choose 10 days, you have automatically the exposure estimates recalculated for a reentry 10 days after the application. For the two active substances and for the combined exposure. Going through the results for resident. So again, we have these two uses. Season was not relevant. For all cards, it can be relevant. You can choose between early and late season. The same for the drift reduction. If you had selected in the data entry the combinations between drift reduction and buffer strip, all the values would appear here and you could choose which one you want to see in the results below. So as for the other, the line you select in the first table is the first appearing here as a single scenario, all the parameters, and the results for adults and children. And below, all scenarios and combined exposure. And you see when you have selected several buffer strip or several drift reduction, you will have every time one line for each combination. You see early season, buffer strip 5, drift reduction 0. It could be late season, buffer strip 5, drift reduction 0. It appears below. And then if you had buffer strip 10, it would be another combination. But then everything is visible and you do not have to enter every time a new use in the application scenario. And for the bystanders, the results are shown the same way for the two uses for the season and combination of drift reduction and buffer strip. We can have a look to the general report. It is the same as previously. So you can see, please note that you can also have, when using a navigation pane, you can easily navigate into your document to see if you're interested in operator, in worker, or specifically in bystander during use in all cards. And you see all the results immediately. And you have also some more detailed results in appendices for operators and workers. Okay, this was the demonstration live of the updated OPEX calculator. Thank you very much for your attention and do not hesitate to ask questions. If you have any question, you have here a button report new issue, or you can directly do an Ask EFSA question and it will be replied as soon as possible. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Frederick, for your insight on the tool. So in this slide, an overview is given on the project for the update of the OPEX guidance and calculator that started with the event we had in March 2022, when the relevant stakeholders, namely Commission, Member States and industry, were engaged in an open discussion with the main focus to identify priorities for the update of the OPEX guidance, aiming at implementing new scenarios such as the seed treatment and sowing scenario, and refine the existing scenarios and or the default values such as for resident and bystanders and workers. Importantly, it was also clarified once again what are raw data. That's to say, original study reports containing experimental information and measure value, and that they are always needed for an independent assessment by EFSA. Additional evidence, such as extracted data and data analysis, can be also provided. However, raw data are always needed by EFSA. After the workshop, a dedicated web page was created in the EFSA website, as well as a functional mailbox you can find in the website to give instruction to the data providers. The data analysis has been outsourced to a consortium of member states and public organizations with relevant expertise in the field through a grant that was implemented in August 2023 and is currently ongoing. Beneficiaries of the grant are constantly supported by the OPEX working group of experts that should then also implement the new updated scenarios and default values in the EFSA outputs. To accommodate the different data submissions at different times, so starting from 2023 to 2024, a modular approach was implemented for the analysis of the data. Starting with the data on seed, so corresponding to the first work package of the project. So these data were submitted already in 2023. And then to proceed with the data on resident and bystanders, that is considered the second work package of the project. And finally, with the data package on the workers that was just completed at the end of 2024, and this is corresponding to the third work package of the project. So you can see here how the project is organized. So with the three work package started at different time due to the different data submissions. So the tasks and the deliverable for the data analysis by the grant beneficiaries are in blue. In yellow, you can see the task for the working group implementation of the outcomes from the data analysis into the EFSA outputs, including updated version of the calculator to be tested before public consultation in orange and finalization. Based on this organization of the work, and also considering that the seed scenario is currently not included in the OPEX guidance and calculator, the intention is to release the related set of models in a dedicated output, a technical report, and updated version of the calculator for public consultation by the end of this year and finalization by mid-2026. In the meantime, the full guidance will be updated based on the analysis of data for resident, bystander, and worker, so work package 2 and 3, as well as a new version of the calculator will be published for public consultation by first quarter 2027. And then the guidance and the calculator finalization is foreseen by end 2027. And of course, an info session will be organized at the beginning of 2028. So this is the current planning. We are here with the three work packages in parallel. We are all doing our best to achieve this first milestone for implementation of the seed model before the update of the full guidance. There is a bit of delay in the data analysis, but building and testing new models is very resource consuming. And as said, we have all the 3 work packages now overlapping. Also, I want to tell you that we have received a substantial number of studies, so more than 300 field studies in total, not considering also the additional evidence. So they are currently under assessment with the 3 work packages, and the analysis, as I said, is ongoing. Therefore, I would also pass the message that further studies cannot be taken into consideration, at least for this update. So, okay, this is the planning. And then we are approaching the end of this event. I hope you enjoyed the webinar and found it useful. As said at the beginning, the recording and the presentation will be soon made available in the EFSA website. We also made available the full list of questions received and the answer provided. Hope that we managed to reply to all received questions. If not, please submit pending questions through the Ask EFSA tool in the website. Please also remember to fill in the evaluation form you are going to receive shortly in your inbox. And with this, I close the webinar. So thank you very much to Frederick and to the contributors, Magtel and Paul, that supported us today. Thanks again to the attendees for their participation, and wish you a nice rest of the day, and goodbye.